Hi, my name's Nick Best and welcome to my analysis of what I think are the most likely issues that are going to come up as part of the Rio fast fashion case study. I started doing this top 10 issues list about 3 years ago, and mostly because students keep on asking me, what do you think is going to come up in the exam, Nick? And actually in my sort of history of teaching, I've been teaching now for coming up for 20 years towards professional exams, I've always been very against actually advising people to prepare for certain topics or certain issues. But what I started to realise when 3 years ago I started to come up with my top 10 list is that the pre-scenes in the strategic case study and going back to the old T4 case study did actually hint at quite a lot of the issues that were coming up. And so whereas in kind of old CIMA exams I would normally say, well, you can't really predict anything that's on the syllabus, I started to find that my predictions were really very accurate. And exam after exam of my top 10, we'd find that, well, a high proportion of those issues would be coming up in the exam. And this has been true as far as the SCS is concerned. It's a little bit different with strategic case study. With the old T4 exam, what used to happen was that there were 5 or 6 different issues that would come up in the exam. With the strategic case study, it tends to be that the exam focuses on 1 or 2 issues that they take all the way through the various different questions in the exam. But what we do find is if you look from variant to variant to variant to variant, then the issues that are hinted at in the pre-scene tend to be the ones that come up. Now, what I also do, and actually I'll talk to you a little bit about how I go about choosing my issues, is that the most important thing for me is what is the focus in the pre-scene, the amount of space devoted to something in the pre-scene. And we see in this Rio pre-scene is that there are a number of topics that have got a page and a half, just on them alone. Some other things that I think that we see is where, there's I'm going to point down the bottom there, my experience. There's just some things in the pre-scene that for me are just odd. It's like the examiner's throwing some knowledge in there, and it's like something I've never seen before, and particularly in this Rio case study. I've seen that in a number of places. You just throw something in and I think, never seen that before, or that's a very unusual thing to be telling us about in the pre-scene. And I've seen, what must it be, 30 or 40 different pre-scenes through my time teaching the final level case study. And it's just those oddities that make me think, oh, why on earth are they telling us that? Is that because they've got something in mind for the variant? Now, I know when I'm writing exams, mock exams, that I have my scenario, then I start writing my question. I will often go back to the scenario and start adding things in and changing things around to make them fit the question that I'm writing. And that's where I think this experience and these oddities come in to be able to think, okay, well, that's unusual. I think that's where the examiner's going. They're going down this route for a particular question. So I want to bring all that experience of that into it. Also, just what are the typical types of questions? If I ask people what they think is going to come up in the exam, sometimes I think, no, that's way off. It's just some types of questions are just very hard to write questions on. And there are other things that are really easy. So as an examiner, you're thinking, right, what should I write my question? Okay, this is a nice topic. I'll write it on that. And there's certain ones that tend to come up quite a lot for that reason as well. And actually, it's also what just comes up as a regular exam topic as well. I'll be bringing those in too. Finally, it's what's strategically important for the business. What are their key areas of focus? Well, focus on those. Now, it's all very well, me kind of predicting what I think is going to come up in the exam. And one thing I will say is, although we do get some very good results in terms of how these relate to the exam questions, I don't want people to think that you can simply learn the answers to these 10 points and think that that's going to be enough to do well in the exam. Doing well in the exam is being prepared, yes, for the case study and for the questions, but actually far more important is your exam technique, your exam approach, doing mock exams and so on. And actually that's a lot of where your time should be focused. The other thing to bear in mind is that we might have an idea of a topic. Okay, and although we've got the idea of that overriding topic, we don't know the detail of what's going to come up. Okay, and so you know, you do need to be prepared to answer various different types of questions, and actually that's where good exam technique, good knowledge of the syllabus, being able to write quickly and get lots of good analysis down actually becomes more important than actually knowing what the likely questions are going to be. Of course, the other thing is that when we have 5 different variants for an exam, there have been variants where none of my issues were actually in the top 10. Now, most of the variants have got quite a lot of these in there, but the reality is that you may find one that just hasn't got anything at all, and you just need to be prepared to answer whatever does come up in the exam. So that's just a bit of a caveat for you. But what I do hope is that this will be very useful. And you know, the question is in what way will it be useful? First thing is that there are certain key models that you can bring up in the exam, and there are marks going for models and using models in the unseen. Now, in the exam itself. Now, remember, you won't be asked, or typically not asked, to do a full model, like do a Porter's 5 forces analysis. But you can bring in elements. If it's a supplier issue, you could bring in elements of supplier power, 5 forces, into that. And so what I want to do is for each of these top 10 issues is say, look, these are the kind of models that you could be using here. So that then when you see that issue come up in the exam, you think, oh yeah, okay, now I can use this model, and that's why. Okay, to get a few extra marks. Remember, you only get the odd extra mark for discussing models, not lots of marks for a description of the model. Okay. Next thing you need to do is to practice mock exams that cover these issues. We will try and cover many of these issues in our mock exams, and you know, it's very important that you've practiced basically questions for these. Okay. Next very important thing is to prepare real life examples. Now, in the exam, you will get 1 mark for a good real life example that relates to the question that's being asked. And so the best way for you to prepare those real life examples is to create a sample paragraph, do your research, create a sample paragraph for the top issues. Because given those are the ones most likely to come up, you've then got some pre-prepared for each of those issues. Okay. Of course, we have our industry pack that's got 25 real-life examples ready, prepared for you. But of course, you can kind of go away and prepare your own. And this 10 is a kind of a good structure for you to use. Okay. You can learn some of the typical key points. I will be going through some of these advantages and disadvantages of particular topics. I've got 1 or 2 of those in this particular case, just to kind of get you thinking and really semi-prepared for some of the more likely issues that are going to come up. Okay, good. So let's move on to our issues. I'm going to do a bit of a countdown here from 10 down to 1. And the first issue that I've got here is a management issue. There's our picture of Rita there that we got from the case study. Obviously, Rita, the CEO, the founder, someone who we respect. Has done a great thing with Rio. Okay, so what's my business of my basis of choosing a kind of issue with the managers, the management, and to some extent staff as well? And that's that staffing issues are a very common topic in the exam. They come up again and again. You wouldn't think that HR would be such a big focus, would you, on a final level CIMA paper? But it is actually. And one of the reasons is that of the criteria that we have, 25% of the marks are for what are called people skills. And another 25% of the marks are for leadership skills. And what that means is that half of your exam is either for people and leadership, which means that when the examiner comes to write exams, of course, issues that come up around people, staffing, management, organising, leading, tend to get prioritised because they've got to find 50% of marks in those areas. This brings HR, people management, managers, directors and so on to the fore in terms of the regularity of questions in the exam. But it's not really something you'd expect, really, is it, for a final level accountancy exam? But it is just the way it is. So working with that then, this is an important topic. Next reason for choosing this is that losing people is specifically mentioned in the case as a key risk. And again, this is one of those things, just not seeing that mentioned as a key risk. Why are they mentioning that as a key risk here? The particular focus is on fashion staff and the importance of those fashion staff to the business. And so for me, this is a hint that something's going to change there, and that's going to create an issue which we need to deal with. Just the general importance of management to the business is something. Another new thing, again, something very unusual, was that when the history was being spoken about, right at the start of the case study, the business was it started off, and Rita set it off, and then it said at a certain point in the history, I think it was around 2002, new managers are brought in, and then it really took off. And it almost says, Rita's very good, obviously, founded this business, run this business, but actually the management are of critical importance to this business. And therefore, should we lose one or two of the top managers, is that going to have a big impact? Again, it's just one of those sort of funny sort of hints that seems a bit unusual to me, and hence the reason why I think that that management issues are a reasonably likely issue in this exam. So what are the type of issues then that we're likely to see? Well, obviously, a key staff member leaving. If it was me and I was writing an exam, then I'd either pick Rita, the sort of situation where this key person, founder, 20% shareholder, really important member of staff, leaves, because that's going to create a big change, a big issue. And what's interesting is when we go back to the last two T4 case study exams, in fact, to be fair, it was the last three T4 case study exams, all of them had a change of CEO. It was really odd. It was one and again, and it was, well, hang on, what's happened to the T4 examiners? Now, we haven't seen it in quite the same way since the new strategic case study's been in, but what we do know is that key people leaving has been an issue in past exams. What's also interesting, actually, is this case study itself is more like the old T4 case studies in terms of the pre-scene than anything that we've seen before. And that's of interest to me. We'll see what that means in terms of the actual exams. But style-wise, this is much more like a T4 pre-scene than it was the old, the new SCS pre-scene. So, yeah, I'm kind of interested to see what happens when it comes to the exam, see if there's a shift in exam style as well, but we'll see. The other person that I suggest that if I was writing an issue on that might leave is Veronique. Veronique is this internationally renowned design expert that heads up our design, and certainly somebody we want to keep. Okay, so that's my most likely issue, really. Could be something like staff asking for a pay rise. I'm thinking mostly of the design staff, and hence the kind of hint of how important they are to the business in the case. The other issue in relation to sort of staff and management that could come up is staffing issues in relation to growth. How do we get the quality, recruit suitable people, train them up effectively as the business grows? So that could be a kind of staffing type, management type issue for us to take into account. But the top two are probably my top tips as the kind of thing for you to be prepared for. Okay, so key points that you must raise then if you get one of these issues come up is, what are the key reasons to keep our key managers? The first is obviously the loss of the management expertise. What you must do is bring up the point that the business really started developing quickly when the managers changed, and therefore hence the importance to this business in particular of really great managers. Now obviously things have come a long way in the last 14-15 years. The business might be able to cope by itself now, but it really is important. Another thing, if you see an issue like this comes up, is one issue you could bring up from a real life point of view is Steve Jobs. When he originally left Apple, then it wasn't long after that the performance of the business really fell down. He then rejoined, and that was the point where him and his team then started to bring in iPods, iTunes, coming through to the iPhone a few years later, and when Apple really started to take off. And so, lose a really key person, and it can make a big difference to the business. Now, actually, since Steve Jobs has died, there was big question about what would be the impact on Apple at that point. Actually, Apple have done very well. So it's not always the case. You can replace good leaders with other good leaders. It's not impossible, but it certainly is a challenge. And certainly the Steve Jobs example is one you can bring up should you see this in the exam. That will get you a mark if you talk about that. Okay. Yeah, there's just the difficulty in the cost of finding a replacement is obviously important. Market confidence is another one. So we are a listed company at Rio, and the stock market will look at, oh gosh, let's say Rita left. What's that going to mean for the business? Confidence could be lost, share price could fall down, might be harder to raise finance in the future, institutional shareholders might start taking an interest in the business, something we don't really want them to do. We just want them to stand on the sides and really not interfere too much if we can avoid it. And so therefore, yeah, that's just something else to bear in mind. And the importance to staff, to the strategy, good customer service, young, fashionable, dynamic culture. We want to keep our current staff and, of course, the managers as well. So here are some important points as far as that is concerned. So what's the kind of theory that you can use then if you get an issue here? Well, there's no doubt in my mind the most important one is, an easiest one to use is Mendelow's matrix. Key staff will tend to be key players. That means high power and high interest. And therefore, let's say they're negotiating over things like pay or terms and conditions, then they'll have a high power as far as that is concerned. So bear that in mind as far as bringing that up. Now, if you do bring that up in the exam, what you can do is very, very briefly remind us of Mendelow's matrix. I'm talking no more than 2-3 lines. But then what you need is to say specifically, this member of staff, Rita, is a key player. She has high power because she's the founder, she's the CEO, she's a shareholder. She's also high interest, naturally, because it's her business as well as being the CEO. She founded it. This power makes, firstly, someone very, very important when it comes to negotiation and the power they've got, but secondly, very, very difficult person to lose from the business. Next, we've got something you should have up your sleeve is knowledge of one of the motivation theories, Maslow's, Hertzberg's. I particularly like Hertzberg because I find it nice and easy to use in the exam. Maslow can be a bit harder to use in written exams, although Maslow's probably slightly better known, but Hertzberg, a very nice motivation theory. One kind of bit of exam tip I've got for you here is that people often think that once they've revised E3, F3, P3, that's it. They've done they know all the theory that they need to know. In actual fact, what we found in particular in the strategic case study is that of all the previous subjects, all of which are perfectly fair game for the examiner to talk about the strategic case study, anything in any of your studies today is perfectly fine for the examiner to talk about. They don't tend to talk about theories from lots of the past exams, with the exception of some of the leadership theories in the E2 syllabus and the HR type of things. And this particular one, Hertzberg's motivation theory, other ones you might want to look up are some of the leadership theories in particular. Things like the management styles theory, things like John Adair's theory of leadership, the staffing and team working type theories like Belbin. Those are all good ones for you to revise quickly at your E2, and we have had those commented upon in examiners' past exam reviews of good models that can be used. Anyway, the one I've got for you here is Hertzberg's motivation theory, which I hope you remember was a two-factor theory that said that staff they will move away from things that make them unhappy and unsatisfied, and those are what are called the hygiene factors. And they're things like poor pay and bad supervision and bad relationships with work and poor working conditions, poor job security. And if people haven't got those, they'll be actively dissatisfied and want to kind of move away from the role. But those hygiene factors don't positively motivate people. The way to positively motivate people are through what he found to be the motivators: responsibility, recognition, challenge, promotion, achievement. You take someone like Veronique. Why is she in business? Okay, yes, the money a bit to some extent, but actually she's probably far more focused on, flexibility of design and being able to design the latest fashions and being able to be creative and dynamic and build the brand. And therefore things like challenge and responsibility, achievement are going to be a far more important way to keep someone like Veronique in the business. But of course this model is for all staff as well. And so we have to think about our staff in our stores and make sure that they've got all those basic hygiene factors met. For instance, the fair basic pay, good working relationships, good working conditions. But that we've built in some of the areas of positive motivation. For instance, we know for a fact that they get paid or they've got share ownership. That almost like builds an element of responsibility. You know, I'm part of the organisation. It's about getting buy-in into the way the business is run and managed. Are there good promotion opportunities and things like that? Okay, so I think management issues then, staffing issues, are very important topic, but still only my number 10. I think that there are more likely issues. There are more things that have been very, very specifically mentioned in the exam. So let's get on with our next one then. And my next issue, issue 9, is internet sales. And as far as the internet is concerned then, they've actually had some good performance in the last year with revenues going up by, well, it was close on 50 million euro. So, but it very specifically says this is an area they definitely need to improve. And with that in mind, it's an area that I think that is if we needed a hint that it's going to be in one of the variants, that is a huge hint for us. Okay. It's a key weakness in the business. And the reality is that they're just strength after strength after strength. When we look at the SWOT, this is one of their few weaknesses, one of the few areas where management have said, we definitely need to do something about this. Of course, as well, there's huge potential in the online market. You look at some of the big players like Amazon, just multi-billion-dollar business, Amazon. And being the leading online fast fashion business worldwide, wouldn't that be a fantastic, huge revenue generator? Okay, so masses of potential, so big strategic issues. IT issues, again, a bit like HR issues, are surprisingly common in the exam. You can't think, well, it's not an IT exam, is it? Okay, but no, but IT infiltrates everything really nowadays, and so therefore being aware of its importance is very important. And actually, this is the main IT weaknesses. Most of their other IT systems look very strong, with perhaps the exception of automation in the Central European factory. And with that exception then, this is hinting to me that this is going to be an important issue. And I'm just thinking practically, if I was writing a question on this exam and I had 5 variants, this is such an easy question to write. And you'd be surprised how important that is in terms of predicting what the likely questions are going to be, in a sense that if it's nice and easy to write, nice and clear and simple as an examiner, you think, yeah, I can write one on that. I know I don't have to do huge amounts of my own research. I kind of get an idea of what online is all about. And so they start to become, you start to see that those kind of topics tend to be the ones that tend to come up in the exam more often. Okay. So as far as internet issues are concerned then, what's the issue likely to be? I think it's likely to be, should we make a large investment in the internet site? This will be my best guess as to what the issue would be. They might do something like give us a net present value, and we have to assess that, assess whether it looks viable or not. Okay. Problems with the current system. Perhaps they might say, well, the current system's got this problem, this problem, this problem. We know that they're only in 20 European countries, which seems strange to me because internet, one of the key advantages of the internet is it's very easy to operate internationally with one central distribution centre. So I don't really understand that. And perhaps they'll clarify why they're only in 20 countries. Why are they not in Asia so far? And then we can then comment on that and discuss that. Okay. Most likely the general advantages of internet operations is going to be something which will come up. That highlighting didn't quite work. Let's try that one again. Hopefully that's going to work. There you are. That's nice. So the advantages of internet operations is a nice simple one. I go through those in a moment versus the advantages of stores. Now, why might that one be useful? It's just that as far as the internet is concerned, they do discuss points about people wanting to go to stores to try things on, and it's one of the more difficult markets to do well as an online business, and so therefore there's a little bit more to it then in relation to the type of market that we're in, and that people really want to try clothes on before they buy them, and how can we overcome that as far as internet sales are concerned. Okay, and then you might be asked to make a recommendation: should we proceed or should we not proceed? So very quickly then, as far as internet sales are concerned, I'm sure you'll be largely aware of these, but let's quickly remind you of some of the key points that you could raise. Internet sales are lower overheads. We don't have stores, for instance. We have fewer staff. It's just a matter of producing one website, which we then use sort of spread all around the world. So higher margins then would be achievable. There's a much wider reach, easier to get to far more markets. Again, one of the reasons I'm confused why they haven't done that already, because it's very easy to just operate internationally in this market. Very easy to have a wider product range. You're not restricted to the size of your store. You can have many more products that are available that you just pop online, and you have them in your distribution centres ready to ship out to customers. So a useful way to expand, and actually a useful way to try out new designs, because you can put some new designs on the internet and see whether they sell, get feedback from customers on them before producing them in large quantities to go out to, well, they've got 1,000 stores now coming up, haven't they? So it'd be a good way to try that out first before then operating more widely. Okay. Another important thing about internet sales is that we automatically get customer information. We have got a record of who the customers are, exactly what they've bought. This can enable us to target market those and basically firstly go to them directly, but also see, well, you've bought this in the past, so therefore this particular offer might be useful to you, or you recently bought this fashion, would you like this latest version, which is related, similar sort of range. Okay. Also, it's very consistent with their customer group. Their customers, young, trendy people, well, don't they buy online? Isn't this the way to go forward in relation to that particular customer group? Things like social media marketing, online is a natural method of purchasing, absolutely right for this group. Of course, simply on the downside then, I've already spoken about, obviously customers can't try the products on. What this means is that returns are more likely. People will get it to their house, they'll try it on and think, no, it doesn't fit me. It's not, I'm just going to return that one. So, we might have to put up with the costs of returns. You could force your customer to pay for the return, but the best businesses with the best service, of course, they ask you to, they will pay that for you. So, so that might be more. Just the whole cost of delivery, obviously, we're delivering off to people individually. That's going to be more expensive than a whole lorry load taken to our distribution centre and then onto our stores. It can be quite difficult to get a kind of brand feel online. They've got a particular type of store design, a particular type of customer service that the staff are giving over, and it's quite hard to get that kind of fashionable modern feel on an internet site. Okay. Online is a whole new way of marketing, and this is a new skill. Now, to be fair, they have done this already, of course, but I think they're probably in their infancy in relation to how good they are at marketing and managing online. And so they have to learn that skill. The marketers will have to operate in a different way. Search engine optimization, social media marketing, contacting people via email and marketing that way, and mobile is a big one as well. And actually, I think that could be an issue, which is that mobile use gone up. An app where people can design their own fashions or something like that, could be that the way they go. I don't know, but these are the kind of issues I think could be the type of things we come up. Yeah, logistics of distribution directly to customers, and then the costs of that. Okay, so as you can see, some reasonable issues. So definitely be aware of those and be prepared to write some good points on it. As part of your evaluation, if there was an NPV, that would be useful. Is it financially viable to invest the money? Somehow I suspect it would be, the investment would be relatively low, probably compared to the long-term returns. Okay. Is it consistent with the 5-year plan? Well, I would say yes, it is. They've got growth as part of that 5-year plan, so I would expect that growth to include a big growth in the internet. How will it be funded? I don't know how much they'd invest. They've already invested 50 million euro. Let's say it's 50 million again. My expectation, they'd probably be able to afford that out of cash flows. It'd only be if you were going up to 200-300 million, you definitely have to raise new debt funding, or even think about going up to equity. Do make a recommendation. Don't just sit on the fence. Don't just say, well, here's all the pros and cons and leave it at that. Say, and my view is we should go ahead with this investment, or we shouldn't go ahead, or go ahead but considering this or considering that, and come up with your key action points. How should we go forward? A project to update, upgrade, put it in the hands of the IT manager, and so on. Okay, then just to finish up, the models that you could use here then, if you were asked to examine should we invest or not, a very good model is suitability, acceptability, feasibility from Johnson, Scholes and Whittington. We're basically saying, is it suitable to the business's position, acceptable to stakeholders, feasible is reasonable, practical. Always a great model to use for if there's an issue and should we go ahead or not, and that will be a good one to use in this case. A net present value analysis, considering if it's a positive or negative one, assuming they've given it to you in the scenario, the reliability of the estimates that they give. The problem with things like internet sales is it's very, very hard to predict. Has the cost of capital that been given, has that been appropriate? These are the kind of things that you could consider whilst you were doing that. So a couple of good models there. Okay, there's my issue 9. Okay, and if you're watching the sample video, we've actually gone on a long time on these top 2 issues, actually over half an hour. I hope you found that useful. I hope you found it informative, and I hope you can go away, and if you get those issues come up in the exam, you'll find those useful too. But the whole set of videos, or this whole video, is 1 hour and 45 minutes in length, because I go on in similar amounts of depth on my other top 8 issues. And so with that in mind, I hope you'll think therefore it's worth your while learning these kind of lessons in relation to my top issues, and actually in relation to the ones that I really think are very, very highly likely to come up in the exam. Well, to be fair, I think these 2 are pretty likely. I think they're good issues, but do the whole top 10 and you'll be in a very good position. So I hope you find that useful. Don't forget as well that this is part of a whole video series, and so actually I've got my industry analysis. I've also got my pre-scene review, going through step by step through the pre-scene, and the strategic analysis as well. And do check out the samples for those, and also I hope you'll find that if you do buy the whole set, you'll find those useful for you in terms of the exam as well. One final thing is just to reiterate something I've said before on some of these sample videos, which is it's not just about understanding the case and understanding these issues. It's also about practice. Exam technique is probably the biggest reason people pass or fail. Actually, it's probably that more than they really know the pre-scene well. If you were asking me who would I bet on, someone that had done huge amounts of exam technique practice, lots and lots of exams, or someone who had really knew the pre-scene well and they were absolutely into that, but they hadn't done any of that practice, my money would be on the person that had done the practice but with real no pre-scene knowledge easily. So what you must do is you must take this knowledge and go off now, master how do you approach the exams, how do you approach planning, how do you approach your time management. Time management is critical, by the way. That's probably the biggest reason people fail, is they mess their timings up. How do you approach mock exams? Get feedback on those mocks. Another thing I see is people often practice mocks, but they don't get feedback. They think that kind of reading it through themselves and doing it themselves would be enough. But what we find is that those people that do get the feedback, they learn from that feedback. Actually, you can, I hope you'll join our course, through all of this, because of course we have feedback on our mocks included as part of that. But you can buy it individually as well. So even if you're just kind of going it alone on a lower budget, then you can do that. But I really recommend, even if it's just one mock, get some feedback, because what you think is right is not necessarily right. It's really rare that people's first script they send to us and passes, really, really rare, because the idea that people have got as to what they need to do and what really is a good script is normally quite different from what they actually from what actually will score the marks in the exam. And it normally takes to the second or third script before people start passing. And I always think those people that haven't actually done and sent in a script are always such a disadvantage, because if that's the first one that anyone's ever marking for you, what's the chances of that having been just brilliant? Anyway, I'll leave it up to you, obviously, but it's just that's from my experience. So whichever way you're going with your studies going forward, I do wish you the best of luck, and hope the exams are successful for you, and you go on and have a very successful career as a CIMA qualified accountant. Okay, bye-bye.